Hey everybody, I'm here with Johnny Payne of Strength Villain fame and Grayskull Linear Progression. This is Colin from the Strength Base, and just doing an interview of Johnny Payne today, sort of what he's about, how reading his stuff has, inspired me and helped me on my quest to, as I call it, total badassery, and can help you do the same. So, Johnny Payne, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin, for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I wanted to start with your website, because I've been reading it for over 2 years, and I've been really impressed and struck by how it's expanded. Because right now, my site as well, it's mostly focused on the physical aspect, but your tagline for your website is mental, physical, and financial fitness. So I'd like to get into what that means to you and how you tackle all three of those aspects, sort of to make a whole man philosophy with your website.
I like that, the whole man. It's pretty cool. Definitely, obviously, I got started similar to how you did. On the online side, I've always kind of been doing the things that I talk about on the site in my kind of offline areas and whatnot. But the biggest thing was I put out the Grayskull Barbell website years ago, and that kind of got me following. Obviously, I've had some controversy in the past, both with the CrossFit thing and
right.
then working with Ripito and whatnot. So there was kind of just a lot of ways that I got more exposure kind of unexpectedly. When I wrote my first, why I resigned from CrossFit, my traffic to my Grayskull site, which was just essentially a blog to kind of showcase what was going on with the people I trained, that really increased overnight. And I kind of became the Antichrist in the CrossFit world for a while. And so that, there was a lot of new traffic that way. So I got a lot of new followers. Then same kind of thing when I departed from the starting strength world and launched Strength Villain at the time. That was just out of necessity. I needed a new place to hang my hat because I was doing a Q&A forum on Ripito's site, and I had to basically have a place to continue the party. Essentially, I didn't want to not communicate with these people, and so I invited them all over to a new site that a friend of mine and I built in the course of a weekend. And lined up some good contributors and whatnot. We basically did not run it. But basically what took place is, even when I was working with Ripito still, it was just that I moved on to doing a lot of consultations and whatnot. And back on the starting strength side, it was more just diet and training. In fact, more specifically diet, because everyone there was basically doing the starting strength thing. Mm-hmm. So I was helping them kind of put their diets together to complement what they were doing, not just get fat and all that, which I've heard is a rumor out there that a lot of people get fat with that methodology. So anyway,
I've heard once or twice that GoMad can do that.
Yeah, like I say, it's just a word on the street, but it's unsubstantiated, of course, but nonetheless, that's helping some of these people get some more clarity about how to do those things, because there's nothing wrong with that program. As a whole, someone could certainly get strong and build some size to a program like that for sure, but they had to have some kind of clarity and strategy to what they were doing diet-wise. But just in conversing with these people regularly, it was amazing, because I have like a conversational style of coaching. I always have.
Yeah.
And the variety of topics that would come up, I would get a lot of kind of random questions and topics that people would ask me about. So it kind of expanded from there, and coaching ended up, even though it was essentially billed as a diet and training type of structure, it just really evolved into, here I'm helping guys with simple financial things. I'm helping guys with they're kind of venting to me about relationship issues and all that. And of course, I wasn't a stranger to that world. Since I was 15, I've been completely obsessed with the studying and modeling of human success.
Right.
So I dove head first into books by guys like Tony Robbins, and that led me to NLP, neurolinguistic programming, which I studied inside and out from the time I was a teenager. And I used to sit on the floor of the bookstore teenager because I didn't have money to buy the books, and I would literally just read books, nonstop. I was that kind of dorky kid in school that always had a book in his hand. But so yeah, I mean, it's just I had a solid background in that, of course, leadership and things like that from my military experience.
Yep.
And I was just very good at persuasion and influence, and so it just kind of evolved. And then one day it was like, all right, well, I had already kind of had a pretty successful offline practice of being more of a general coach of sorts, and so I just kind of evolved it into that on the site. Wasn't a ton of clarity there in the kind of marketing of it. So, and then with my site, I just started, like you said, about the total man or the whole man. Those are things that have kind of always been important to me. I mean, I had a kind of a fascination with like the men's magazine concept, and I saw a lot of issues with the more modern men's magazines. I like when people fashion Playboy magazine, and not modern Playboy, but Playboys back in the day. And so yeah, that's actually what I'm doing right now with the Proper Villain, which is the new magazine that ships here in February. There's a free trial issue offer up on my site. But yeah, that's basically how it evolved. I mean, every time I would add a new piece of content that seemed, like it didn't have anything to do with what the general base was, there's maybe a few people that would complain. I mean, I remember when Strength Villain first launched, and like the first week we did an article on about getting away with murder, which was kind of funny. And there were a couple people that complained. So what does this have to do with strength training? And of course, if you're the guy running the show, you can pretty much do what you want. So it's just like, this is something that I thought my readers might find interesting. The guy who wrote it had a lot of insight into that world. So, but every time I would put something else out, whether it was relationship stuff, finance stuff, it just I got a lot of great feedback, and I get a lot of emails and things from people that were like, it impacted them somehow or gave them some kind of guidance, and then the coaching evolved. Now we have JohnnyPayneLive.com, and Strength Villain is involved into that, and that's it, man. It's mental, physical, and financial fitness, all the things you need to just, like you said, total badassery.
Yep.
And we're trying to make a league of people here who are just really high-performing individuals in every aspect of life.
Yeah. And I think, you put it really well. It's hard to separate the self-discipline and the values of hard work and suffering through pain that you get from physical training. It's hard to separate that from the other aspects of life. And once you start doing that and you get that exposure to that sort of, hard lifestyle, it filters into other things. Like it filters into your job, into your financial decisions, So I think it's really cool that you're able to illustrate that with the scope of issues that you cover.
Well, that's the thing too. I mean, in my book Blueprint to Beast that I wrote last year, might have been 2 years ago now. Shit, no, I guess it was last year. But anyway, in Blueprint we talk about the 5 life headings, and the 5 life headings that I discussed, these are basically the 5 areas of your life that pretty much anything can be lumped into one of the 5. We have your body, we have your relationships, which are any interpersonal relationship, whether it's an intimate relationship with friends or family, whatever. Then we have professional life, we have personal finance, and we have what I call mission, which is essentially what's your legacy or your greater purpose, what is it you're trying to ultimately accomplish. And one of the things I illustrate with that is just that if any one of those areas is out of whack, or you're not progressing, because progress, we like to say progress is what makes us feel alive. If we don't feel that we're progressing in any one of those areas, it kind of knocks the whole system out, right? So a guy that's really unhappy with his body isn't going to be as high performing in the other areas. The guy who's maybe killing it, has a great body, great career, lots of money, suffers a really tragic breakup or divorce or something like that can take him out of whack too. So it's exactly what you're saying is that, looking at it kind of in reverse, if we really start hammering the body and, like you say, you learn those characteristics of discipline and hard work, and you see the results and all paying off, then it does spill over into the other areas kind of naturally. You just develop, obviously, I mean, you can see the link between, getting a better body and having more relationship success, generally speaking, and from the traction standpoint. Mm-hmm. But it just spills over into confidence and being more proactive. And anytime you're more confident in life, you can accomplish more. So It's definitely, it's kind of an unavoidable correlation there. You know, there's parallels for the things that make you successful in each of those headings. And so, you know, why pigeonhole yourself into only addressing one of those points?
Right.
You know?
True. And like they say, nothing succeeds like success. So, you know, you start it in one area, and the confidence you gain and the discipline you gain, it's going to have a ripple effect on the rest of your life. If you let it, you know, you can kill it, but if you let it, it'll start happening for you.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
A lot of my readers are mixed martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-jitsu practitioners. That's part of where my site started, because I had a lot of MMA friends and BJJ friends who, you know, strength and conditioning was foreign to them. You know, they would go to grappling practice and grapple for 2 hours, but they didn't know how to actually get stronger other than go to practice. So I started giving them advice, and, you know, your site, you offer seminars actually. Not so much, I don't want to say self-defense, because that sounds like you're, you know, teaching women to have the confidence to kick a padded man in the groin. But it's straight up on fighting, and it's on, you know, hitting to incapacitate. So with MMA, I mean, in the history of martial arts, everything comes out and it says, we are, you know, the closest that you'll ever get to a real fight. You know, UFC is as real as it gets. MMA, you know, reality fighting, that sort of thing. But you've said in a lot of your articles that MMA and Jiu-Jitsu, you never see anything like that, or it doesn't look like that when you get into a real street fight. So for people who are in this world, who are interested in, you know, how to kill an attacker or incapacitate an attacker in a real world situation, what would you suggest as, you know, the best preparation for, you know, really defending yourself in a life and death situation?
Well, first, just to clarify a little bit,
sure.
I mean, I have a huge appreciation for MMA as a sport. I have a lot of close personal friends that compete at various levels, and I train a lot of guys that are MMA guys and jiu-jitsu guys. I have a long-standing background in those worlds myself. Back in 2002, I had a exhibition match at Fort Bragg with Luis Gracie, actually, and he was like a hero of mine at that point. And right now, one of my guys that I'm working with on the business growth side, and a good friend of mine is Tyler Melee Minton, who was on Ultimate Fighter. He's in UFC now, has a contract for UFC. He's also now a coach, a strength and conditioning and nutrition coach to guys like Chael Sonnen, James Krause, people like this that have become friends of his. So kind of deeply entrenched in that world as it is.
Yeah.
But as far as your question, just for another point of clarity, when you mentioned about a street fight, it still kind of paints this picture of this competition, right? So you have MMA and then you have street fighting, which is two guys kind of duking it out and battling it out, whatever. But it's still kind of that agreed upon combat.
Okay.
You know, and that's what we call a social conflict. Okay, so in a social conflict, this is the type of thing that happens because, you know, someone, sits in somebody else's chair or talks to somebody's girl or something like that, and it's just kind of this mutually agreed upon combat. And in that context, you can say, yeah, you know, that maybe you don't see the things because the rules aren't there like they are in MMA, right? But more so what I address with the Great School Academy of Combat Sciences, which is primarily an offline business, which is why you don't see very much of that online at this point. Primarily what we address is what we call asocial conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and an asocial conflict is just where violence is going to occur. You don't have to elect to participate in it. It's just kind of brought to your door. This is the home invasion. This is the person who is just, you know, blindsided, hit over the head with a bottle, and now finds themselves fighting for their life. Dealing with someone who's on PCP or on some other kind of drug that takes away their morality and, you know, is trying to separate them from their money or worse. So basically that's the context in which we operate. And as far as preparing for that type of situation, you know, you mentioned about there's people that are interested in learning how to kill. And what we say is that there's, you know, if you understand how to kill a person, if you understand how to completely incapacitate a person to that level, then you can always step back from that, and you can always, you know, there's an escalation of force, right? We don't have to kill this person in order to, you know, successfully navigate the encounter every time. But if we need to know how to kill a person, again, look at that, 4 guys in your bedroom home invasion situation, then you're probably going to want that. You're probably going to want that knowledge. And if you don't know how to do that, again, I'm not talking down the MMA crowd, but throwing somebody in a triangle choke or scoring points with leg kicks when you have 3 guys with blunt objects or knives trying to beat you to death or stab you to death, that's not really preparing you for that context. It's preparing you excellently to compete in a sport, right? But it's not getting you ready for that. So as far as preparation, I mean, the keys to successfully navigating an asocial conflict are understanding quite simply how to shut a person off, right? And the way that we look at it, we talk about this person needs to be either unconscious, they need to be crippled, meaning they do not have use of some part of their body that shuts down their ability to do whatever it is that they're trying to do, or they need to be dead. In some cases, they flat out need to die. And if it's and again, this isn't me, telling people, oh, well, we're just going to make you train killers. I mean, in essence, they become that, but it's not out of some, perverted, love of violence. It's actually quite the opposite. Right. So we need to be able to diffuse a situation by incapacitating a person completely.
And that's preservation of life. That's preservation of life. That's not,
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. It's not, the analogy I use all the time is, I work with a lot of guys in the offline sense, whether they're law enforcement or whatever, and a lot of these people are like big-time gun enthusiasts. And of course, I have a love for firearms too. I mean, from the time I was a kid, and I was, obviously I served in the military and did the things I did there, but, these people, it's like they, walk around and they have CCW permits, they carry guns, they have a couple of knives that they carry, or, all these different options for self-defense tools. Okay, and at the end of the day, those things are great if they're in your hand and you need them. But the analogy I use is if you can be a big-time gun enthusiast and a doomsday prepper or whatever you want to call it, and if you're in the shower and your back door's kicked in and your kids are in the other room and you have a group of unruly individuals that maybe even have the wrong house and think that you're a drug kingpin or something, and they're trying to send a message, and your wife's asleep in bed. It's not people say, oh, I have a gun in the bathroom, I do this, I do that. But at the end of the day, if you can't do what you need to do completely naked in the shower, getting out of the shower, then you're underprepared. Bottom line. So we always we do a lot of firearms training and things like that for people as well. But it's always establishing that base, which is the same thing with the training methods we talk about with layering and the base. We have to have that base of being able to incapacitate and or kill with our hands first before we start worrying about ancillary things.
Okay. And, I've read from Tony Blauer, the guy who does the spear system, he said before going into the weeds of, how to break someone's bones or whatever, he said it's really the number one thing is the mindset of being able to deal with a violent, and using your term, violent asocial encounter. Because when people are faced with stress or, with extreme danger, if they're not trained properly mentally, they could be the fittest person in the world, the most lethal person in the world, but they might just shut down. So,
well, I mean, I agree and I disagree with that point. Okay. And the reason I say that is I talk about the 80-20 and, different than the just classic Pareto's law, but 80-20 has us at 20% of our success in anything that we do or the mechanics that we use, whether it's a methodology or technique, or in the case of finance, what you're doing with where you're investing, all your habits. 80% of your success is your mindset or is your psychological preparation, right? But as far as in that context, I speak from experience, and I'm not, slamming Blauer. I don't know him personally or whatever. I am familiar with this stuff, the spear system, and Chu Fendo, and the helicopters flying over them trying to steal the secrets of the old Cancer Productions videos and all that stuff. So believe me, I'm a little bit more familiar with Blauer than most. Okay. But the idea with that is that you're not going to be prepared mentally. You're not prepared mentally for asocial conflict. And you don't have any time to prepare when it's happening. That's why it's asocial. It happens because it's happening to you. Okay. Right? So it's one of those things that people say, you have to get the mindset right and train that. It's not really a trainable thing.
Right.
per se. I mean, yes, there's things we can do to prepare and educate so that we understand better in those contexts and give people tools. But as far as saying it's like with combat, and, being a combat veteran, you can have someone who absolutely believes they are prepared and ready mentally for combat, and then, shit hits the fan, it's a little bit different. We used to say, when I was in the military, if we were on a mission that was like a movement to contact, which is where we are going somewhere with the purpose of engaging in combat, the mindset going into that is different. It's predatory. It's like hunting a deer. It's just, you're not afraid in that context. I mean, you have adrenaline, your heart's racing or whatever, maybe the first time you shoot a deer, but that's pretty much the mindset in that. It's totally different than you're on a movement, on a regular mission, and bullets start whizzing by you. As soon as you're placed in that defensive role, trust me, the preparation, any preparation that you thought was there is gone. And at that point, it's just all about adapting to the changing circumstances. So that's why I disagree, and that I don't believe spending a tremendous amount of time on the mindset is horribly important in that. We like to look at the principles. That's why my book was called Principles of Violence. Because we like to look at the principles that are necessary and drill those into a person so that when it comes time that they do have to adapt and react and respond, that they're able to then, take action and utilize the principles that they understand, beyond just the cognitive understanding of having read them or had those ideas introduced into them. That's also why when we do these events, we do them very intensive. It's an immersion style event. We have people out for 3 days at a minimum, and they are actively training for 8-9 hours a day during those days. And we want this person to be completely delirious and exhausted, because they need to be able to, apply principles under those conditions. And I think that's infinitely more important than some kind of, focus on creating the proper mindset for an encounter like that. Because when an encounter like that happens, there's no time. There is no time, and there's no degree of mental preparation that replaces just being thrust into that environment and having to do it. So you're not going to be ready for it until you've been through it, honestly.
True. Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's kind of hard to simulate a home invasion. I mean, it's like you said, you're in it, and it's happening to you because it's happening to you, and now it's your time to deal with it.
Right.
So
at that point, it's just, how deep is your understanding? How comprehensive is your understanding of the tools that you have to use? The principles. And that's why, like I say, I mean, it's just not. I think that the mindset prep is far more important for something like MMA, like you're discussing. I mean, there's a lot of guys that I coach that are fighters, and there's a lot of hypnosis techniques and different things that we use. I mean, Mike Tyson, is my favorite boxer of all time. Tyson worked with a hypnotist. Castanado had him hypnotized, once a day, twice a day for years. And I think that in a sporting context, when you know the rules and you know how this is going to work going in, then preparing yourself from a mindset standpoint is a lot more applicable and relevant. If you're preparing yourself mentally for a possible home invasion or for being blindsided, like I was 19 years old, hitting the back of the head with a baseball bat. Situations like that, it's to sit and get yourself mentally ready for that. It's next to impossible.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That's a really good point. So I mentioned that a lot of my readers are into MMA and Jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
And my site is not a physique-based site. It's actually quite against, just doing isolation exercises for the sake of aesthetics. Actually, I'm not against that. It's just not what I go into. I'm about building functional strength. But a lot of my readers are interested in how to bulk, how to gain lean muscle as much as possible. And so I know in your 2 books, Swole and the LCI method, you go into that. And I mean, I think I've covered the basics pretty well on the site, but for people looking to add muscular body weight, what would you say is the most important thing for them to keep in mind or for them to do? In my opinion, I'd probably say meal prep, because personally that's where my weakness is. If I don't have food made, I'm probably not going to be hitting my calorie totals for that day.
Sure.
So what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to add a significant amount of muscle?
Well, I mean, something that you said, and you didn't phrase it exactly like this, but a lot of people do. I'll say something like, "What's the one biggest thing?" Right, and it's kind of funny because from the marketing world, the business development side of things that I'm in, we kind of like it's kind of a joke with us. There's a guy, Dan Kennedy. He's the godfather of marketing, and he kind of has this joke that people come up to him and ask him, "What's the one most important thing I could do?" And it's always like, it depends on who you are. That one thing for you is going to be different than someone else, right?
Yeah.
So because your habits are different, the things that come more natural to you are different. So it's always going to be different person to person. But there are a few key principles that need to be in place for someone to successfully grow and build a lot of mass. So those things are training obviously has to be conducive to that, right? So you have to be training in a progressive manner. I've gone on record many times and said that all training is linear progression.
Yep.
And it is. By nature, it's linear progression. People look at that term and they kind of dissect that and make it into something it's not. But if you're not doing more than you were before, whether it's more reps with a fixed weight, whether it's more weight, if you're not getting stronger, consistently getting stronger, and adding some serious measures of performance, then you're not creating the environment consistently to grow.
Exactly. And I want to interrupt you for just a second, say amen to that, because I want anyone listening to pay attention to this. I'm actually doing a post right now on like shitty programs. So I'm going through like all the bro magazines and all the muscle magazines and looking at the programs they have, because I want to educate people what exactly is wrong with these things. And in all of them, there's no mention of increasing the weight. It's do this exercise, with these dumbbells and whatever, and then just do that for 6 weeks. So anyone listening, I really want to drive home JP's point here that you should always be striving to do heavier or more. No matter what your goal is, there should be progress. If progress is not built into the program, if there's not a mechanism in there to deal with how much should the weight jump or how much should the distance increase or whatever, then you might want to reevaluate the program.
Right, and that brings up an excellent point too. It's a point I hammer home, whether it is in training, whether it's in finance or whatever, and that is that whatever you measure increases.
Yeah, what gets measured gets managed. Exactly.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of one of my favorite movies of all time is Wall Street with Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen. And Wall Street, Michael Douglas plays Gordon Gekko, who's like my favorite movie character of all time. And he has this quote in there: "Greed is good." And I always tell people, when you hear the word greed, the linguistic association with that is negative. But more, you use the word more. If you're not doing more is the key to success. Always. I don't care what you're doing. More is better. It has to be, right? If you're not doing more than you were, if whatever metrics you're using are not increasing, then you're standing still. And if you're standing still psychologically, you're not feeling alive because you're not progressing. And physically, you're not progressing, or your bank account's not growing, or whatever. So more is necessary. Now, just a quick note about the shitty programs. I think that's an awesome post. I look forward to reading it and hopefully sharing it with my readers. Cool. But I've also made the point about bench and curl guy, right, for a long time. And everybody that's involved in a more intellectual approach to training, then the typical meathead bench and curl guy kind of slams this guy, talks a lot of shit on bench and curl guy. Bench and curl guy, the guy goes in and does his bench press on Monday, does his curls, always skips leg day. We know the guy, right? And he's the guy that usually takes creatine and maybe a protein shake and eats chicken fingers or something like that because he heard protein's good for him. And I said this a lot about like the CrossFit people because they're like the harshest on bench and curl guy.
Yes.
And a lot of the starting strength people too. And one point that I usually make is that almost across the board, the one thing that bench and curl guy has going for him than the others is he always looks better. Right? And he's physically stronger. Right? And this comes back to my point about the 80-20. Right? 20% is the mechanics. So I've literally seen people, and I was one of them,